All right, welcome back, students. Here to talk to you about the document-based essay, the largest essay for a world history class in terms of the expectations by the College Board. We have the long essay question, the short answer question, and the document-based question, in which you write an essay that could be, according to the rubric, just one long paragraph, but ideally three paragraphs, maybe two at the very least. For this class, we'll talk about that. And you have 7 documents that you use as evidence as you answer the prompt/question that they give you. So I'll talk about that. I'm going to remind you of some of the main points that you need on the rubric, which you've seen already. Very first thing you need is to have some sort of thesis. So I always recommend that you start with your introduction, and your introduction is kind of laying the groundwork of your essay, like any essay. In this case, you're going to start with something they also require, which is contextualization of the prompt. What that means is you want to set it. You want to describe the historical setting or context of this prompt. So if you're writing an essay where they ask you to talk about a specific revolution or the way people's lives were affected by revolutions in the 18th, 19th century, you will first talk about what's going on in the time period leading up to the 1800s in terms of the whole world, in terms of thought. Maybe talk about the Enlightenment in Europe and how people started to have new ideas on how to consider their view of authority and how governments get their power. And then you would talk about your specific revolution, or maybe a couple revolutions, and then talk about your revolution. If you're talking about imperialism in the 19th century, you'll want to talk about how first there's industrialization, and then European powers, and later Japan and the United States needed to feed their industrial economies by acquiring more raw materials and resources around the world. So they set up new colonies, and this is a new age of imperialism as opposed to the first age of colonialism, which would be 1500s, 16th century Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch expansion into the Americas and Asia. And this new era of imperialism is coming from industrialization, and then that would be your context. You talk about all that for a couple sentences, and then you kind of go right into your prompt, whether it is about how imperialism affected people, how people responded to imperialism, so on. And then that's going to be your thesis, a very detailed response to the question. Normally the documents are there to help you create a thesis. So you read through the documents and you find out, oh, okay, it wants me to talk about the effects of imperialism on people in local communities, and I can break it down into positive and negative, or women and religious, or however you want to break it down. The documents will help you organize and figure out your subtopics, and ideally you come up with 2 subtopics. So we'll talk about that a little more. I'm going to skip down to the bottom of this page you see here. It says it's 55 minutes. So they designed to give you 55 minutes for this essay when you take it in May with the AP exam. For my class, I'll give you 60. And the recommendations, you just spend the first 15 minutes just reading the 7 documents, brainstorming, writing some notes down, typing them down in the space you have on your computer. We'll be doing it on Canvas. There will be a locked space you'll have. You obviously don't forget to bring your Chromebooks to class for this. And then once you've brainstormed some ideas about the documents, you can go ahead and start your writing and start with your introduction, and then kind of go into the documents, which I'll talk about more. Remember, you need to have 5 documents that you talk about for my class. For the AP test, you need only 4, but why not do more? Because if you do 5 and you screw one up, you'll still get okay on the AP test. That is a good score. If you do 6 for my class and you're screwing up, you're still going to get a good score, right? So it doesn't matter if you make a mistake in analyzing a document, as long as you do 5 other ones correctly. So you can be totally wrong with the document. I just ignore that. If you have 5 that are good, then you're going to still get a chance to get an A, which is cool. There's a lot of room for mistakes in this essay. So you want to get 2 points. How do you get just 1 point out of 2? You just talk about 3 documents, and that's it. And so if you just talk about 3 documents, you'll get 1 point. I'm in number 2 here on this page now. You get 1 point for your introduction. One point for your context, another point for your thesis. That's 2 points. And then you will get 1 point for 3. And then if you knock that up to 5 documents, you get 2 points. Okay, so there's 4 points already here in numbers 1 and 2. And then outside evidence, or evidence beyond the document, again, is evidence that is nowhere found in the document. It is telling the reader, telling me, that you've been paying attention, you've been studying. A very good student can read documents and formulate a question, but a very good student who doesn't know the material cannot make up outside evidence, right? They have to know it. And so this is where you would come in. If I ask you about imperialism and I have documents to talk about all these colonies, but there's not a document about the Congo, and you talk about the Belgian Congo, that would be outside evidence. Or you talk about Japan and Korea, and there's no documents about Japan and Korea, that would be outside evidence. If there's no documents about India, and you talk about British imperialism in India, that would be outside evidence. So if it's not in any of the documents and you bring it in, you're doing it, okay? And so you just have to do that twice, and for me, and I think that's very easy because we spent a lot of time. We know this essay we're going to write next is about imperialism. I'm not going to ask you stuff that's tricky, and you should, if you've read chapter 10 and you understand it really well, you should be fine. The next thing is the analysis and reasoning, and I'll break into this more in a second. This is what we also call sourcing. You need to do that with 3 documents. That's where you consider the audience, the context, the purpose, or the point of view. And you do that to show that knowing one of those things helps you understand a document better and helps further your argument. I'll talk about that in a minute, and I'll show you some examples. And then, so that's 6 points right there. If you do that with 3 documents, why not do 4? Why not do 5 that way? If you make a mistake, doesn't matter. If you get 3 correct, then you're in a good spot for that point. And then your final point is the kind of being exceptional point that they call it. I call it being a work of art. It's just like this amazing essay. 1-2% of students who take the AP exam every year get 7 out of 7 on this. It's really hard. If you really want this 7th point, the best way of doing it is being organized, that is having nice paragraphs, analyzing the documents thoroughly, having your evidence be on the document that's very well fitted, well situated in your argument. Make sure that you source more than 4, maybe 5, 6 documents, that you use all 7 documents as evidence. Do all those things, then you have a better chance of getting a 1. Okay, so that extra 1 point, to get to 7 out of 7. The 7 out of 7 is a very rare thing to achieve. It can be done. I've given it myself, but be aware that it doesn't affect your grade in this class. You still get a strong A if you get a 6. Nobody says, oh, if I got a 7, I would have gotten a B. I would have gotten an A instead of a B. You still get an A if you get a 6. So it's just a great achievement, but it's super, super rare. So try it, and you might get it. I don't know if my students got an AP exam because I just see their overall score. I don't see their individual DBQ scores. So, but I'm assuming some have gotten it in the past. All right, let's break it down. So in talking about the sourcing, or what they call analysis and reasoning on the AP exam, point of view, intended audience, context, purpose. Now, I did a practice DBQ with you last semester on the use of silver in the age of mercantilism, and my colleague and I created this document-based question, and then I actually wrote a sample response for you. That is on the class agenda for you to read, so I highly recommend you read that just to see what a good DBQ essay will look like. And I wrote it pretty fast. I had the documents, I wrote it, I didn't spend like days on it, and I may have gone back over, I wrote it a couple years ago, I've edited it a couple times, but in general, it's a solid response that would get a good grade. And so you want to look at that just to kind of see what it looks like. But in terms of sourcing, just want to remember, how is the point of view, how is the purpose, the historical situation, that means context, or intended audience relevant to your argument? Now, that's kind of weird that they say that. It's really better to say, how does knowing the audience, the purpose, the context, situation, or point of view help you understand the document better? So I have like 6 things here that I think are helpful, that might make it easier for you if you can kind of keep these in your back pocket as tools about how to show sourcing. So you want to remember that you want to show how it helps you interpret the document. So once you've explained a document, you use it evidence, you want to say things, so that's why it's not surprising that. It makes sense that since this is a blank, or since he or she is a blank, then this. So I have all these examples. The last one, since she is blank, she might be biased, or since she is blank and blank, she's likely a reliable source. So I'll go through some examples of that next. So here's one, it should be a possessive form. Remember, G's purpose is likely to sway opinion in Parliament. Oh, I should say his purpose. I should be an H there. So I don't remember who wrote this document that is in this DBQ, but you can find it in the sample document 7. His purpose is likely to sway opinion in Parliament to get politicians to vote in a manner that is favorable to his belief in England staying involved in trade with Asia and maintaining imports from Asia. He seems to be open to trade with other states, okay, thus perhaps going against mercantilist values. So what's his purpose? His purpose, so he's a member of Parliament is what it should say. Since he's a member of Parliament, he's trying to get them to vote a certain way, okay? So that's his purpose. Context. Mercado points out that silver flowed out of Spain since the empire, at least, because he references Manila. As a scholar of the time, this is his background, right? This is his sort of his point of view, you can say, or his context. He likely subscribed to mercantilism and was pointing out that the loss of silver to China for Chinese good was bad for Spain. Okay, so this actually could be a point of view as a scholar of mercantilism, or as someone situated in this time. You can use this to consider context, okay? And then another more specific point of view one. This is a Spanish priest, likely had firsthand accounts of the events and is a reliable, if slightly biased source, since he likely ministered to the indigenous people. So it looks like what he has is a compendium and it reads like a factual account, so it could be reliable, but he could be biased because he cares about the people he ministers to, these indigenous people who are suffering under the Mita system that the Spanish are exploiting during this age of imperialism. So for document 5, you have to go back and look at those documents that we did last semester for the silver DBQ, which you can just Google on the agenda if you do a little search. If you don't have it still, hit silver DBQ and you'll find a link to it. So we spent a lot of time on that, but I'll go over a more another recent example that we did. And then here from China, we have a scholar or a political leader giving a report to the emperor. His audience is the person with the most power in deciding trade policy, so it's not surprising that he used specific facts and data. So again, who is he writing to? Since he's writing to the emperor, it's not surprising that he's doing it this way. All these things help me understand the document better. It shows me that I'm thinking about who the audience is to understand why a person would write a certain way. If I go back here, I'm thinking about what this person's experience might be to help me understand why they might think a certain way. I am thinking about the time when someone's living to think about the kind of the prevailing ideas of their time that might permeate their thought, might get them to think a certain way. And I might think about who they're trying to sway or what their goal is, and that might help me understand the document for why they're writing it a certain way. We just did a reading on imperialism, so here's another example I went over in class from this guy Nauroji, who is an elite Indian leader in India under British imperialism. This is actually from a student from last year. So on the other hand, in the second document, the Indian intellectual Nauroji recounts the good intentions of British and the great blessings of their presence in India. As the first member of the British Parliament of Indian descent, Nauroji most likely was of the Brahmin caste and an Indian elite, educated and put into a position of power. Okay, they're considering his point of view. And so he's probably loyal to Britain. With this in mind, one can consider his perspective with caution, as he was one of only a few elites. It's not surprising that he would feel this way. This account lacks the experience of the lives of everyday people. Now, it doesn't mean everything that we're saying here is correct, but it is saying that we're actually being pretty logical and thoughtful as historians. We might not know. He might not be in the Brahmin caste. We're not saying he is. We're saying it's likely, right? Because we know that upper caste people were more likely to work with the British and benefit from British rule in this way. And so it is important to remember this. We're saying, we have to consider this with caution. We have to be wary. So we're just telling the reader we understand that this document is showing the good and bad of British rule in India, but we have to be cautious about how we accept it because we know this person's background, okay? And then here's a picture of yours truly. I drew this in the class just to kind of remind you, think about the introduction as like a triangle with the context down to like a funnel to the thesis, and then maybe 2 subtopics in your DBQ. Organize a few documents under one subtopic and organize a few more in the other subtopic. And so again, I wrote all this here. It's not required, but it is a really good tool. If you look at the College Board's requirements, there is nothing about paragraphs, much to your some of your teachers, chagrin, like it's very much like just answer the question with a thesis and have a context somewhere and use these documents well, and you're going to do well. Now, I want you to be more organized, so I do want you to have an introduction with contextualization and then thesis. I think that's easier. I think it helps you stay focused. Hit return, hit tab or space, and indent and start your second paragraph. Organize your documents under that. Find out what they might have in common. Again, just go through the documents and think about what they could have in common for subtopics, and then do the next one, okay? One thing I'll say is what not to do, and I'll say this in class: do not just start going down. Document 1 says this, document 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is a very rudimentary and kind of not very thoughtful way, I'll put it that way, of writing a DBQ response. We want to organize it according to subtopics and stuff like that. So probably one of the guarantees for not getting a super good grade is by just going down the documents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because you're not organizing. You're saying, this is what this one says. It's possible that you can do that and connect them to a thesis, but it's very hard. And I've graded like thousands of essays in my life now, and I've not read many like that have been successful. So take it from me, follow my recipe. It's not here to make your life harder. It's here to make your life easier. So if you understand this, and I'm not the first person to come up with this idea. This is like kind of how I was taught as a kid many years ago, and teachers still teach this way. But I think it is the way. You have your introduction, you have your supporting paragraph, you have your next supporting paragraph, and within those you have 2 or 3 documents. Remember, you only need 5 documents, and then whenever you talk about a document as evidence, you can also do the sourcing. You can talk about the audience, the context, the purpose, point of view right then and there. You don't have to do it later. You just do it all at once. You can do it later if you want to, but you don't have to. Be efficient with your time. And then you can bring in the outside evidence at that point. You don't have to put the outside evidence at the end. You could just bring it in. If there's a subtopic on positive effects of imperialism for people, you can talk about documents to show that, and then bring in outside evidence that shows that, and then go to the next subtopic. So whatever the question is, causes of revolutions, right? Talk about economic causes, talk about the documents that fit with that, and then also bring in the outside evidence. So you don't have to do everything in an order. Everything can kind of go with the subtopics. Hopefully that all makes sense. But this again, look at this, listen to this video again, look at my examples, look for some other videos that other people have done online, look at stuff from last year. You should be fine for this DBQ. All right, I'll see you in class soon. Hopefully this is helpful for at least one of you. I guess if it's good for one, then my time is well spent. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.